Yeah, that's true.
Me, I'm representing nothing.
Coffee, though?
Sorry, man.
It's okay. I'll just take sips of yours. I don't have your earbud in my ear, so
That's right.
Okay, hang on. Let's close this stupid thing. And let's open this stupid thing. New session. Dun, dun, dun.
How come you look so much bigger than me on the screen?
Okay, you there?
Yeah.
Are you smaller or are you just farther away?
We're here.
And
Well,
we're
I'm
live.
going to say both of you slightly more handsome on Zoom than on the television program.
Well, thank you. That's we actually dumbed down our appearance on the television program just so that people would say that in the post-race interviews.
Exactly.
Yeah. We are smashing out there, but it distracts a lot of the people from the story. So we wanted them to focus on our hardships and Dan's body.
That's right. My sweaty, hairy, bare body.
Yeah.
Where are
face
you
down in the mud?
Where are you physically located?
We are in Bend, Oregon.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're
Bend Racing.
You're Bend Racing. There we go. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to I've been messaging a ton of folks today. Trying to get and thanks for not big timing me. Some people are big timing me and like I've got too many interviews. So thank you for not big timing me. I appreciate it.
No problem. Wait. Aren't you the big time? I thought, man.
I am the big time, but some
okay.
people think maybe I guess that I'm not, so that they're
right.
Yeah. So anyhow, but you did respond right away, mostly so you could make fun of Dan, which I truly appreciate. And I guess the easiest place to start would be, as experienced racers, which you are.
Yes.
When you got to the point where Dan was struggling,
right?
You guys know enough to know that it's a long race.
Yeah.
Right. And he's probably not going to get over this fucking sunstroke very quickly. So why not just lay in the water for a while and cool the heck down? It looks like,
I mean, we tried that not for very long.
It looks like you just stuck you in like you were over by the barn, your legs were up, and the next thing you know, they were dragging you along again, and it was like,
I should have gotten in the water there. Well, that would have been been smart.
I mean, it's tough because the show only shows so much, and and they portray things that are kind of relevant to the general field. So we have no problem with that. The question we get a lot, or have gotten a lot since people have seen the show, is like, why did you guys go out so hard, right? Because you have Bear Grylls in the helicopter looking down on us saying
go hard, go hard.
Yeah, but also saying they're going too hard, they're going to blow up. And the reality is, like, we are,
Jason, you're a little quiet, actually.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
We can switch to different audio here.
Hey, go now.
Yeah, is that better?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, but then are you still there? Did he cut out?
No, he should still be.
Okay. I hear you both. It's
okay,
good.
Great. But we've been training for this sort of racing and our high level athletes. So we went out to be competitive. And we know from our experience that the further up we start in that lead pack and stay in that lead pack, any team that's in that lead pack when it starts to break up is the teams that you're competing against, for the whole race. And we are, no bones about it. Like, we're amazing paddlers. Like, Dan and I specifically have trained a ton of paddling over the last 10 years with Olympic level coaches, and won a bunch of
12 hours is a short race for us.
And won a lot of ultra endurance paddle races. Our very first go at them, the Everglades Challenge and the Yukon River Quest, we got second in. So we know what it feels like to paddle hard for distance, and so that's exactly where we wanted to be. We weren't like, oh, we have to be in first. It just happened that our pace was faster than any other team out there. And what we really missed is just, you got the excitement. We normally don't have helicopters and like big cameras pointing at us saying, you guys are doing awesome. And, there was no wind, right? And none of the top 10 teams in that thing put up their sails. And even the teams that put up their sails basically paddled just as hard. They just had an awesome visual sail. and we just missed the signs, partly because we were excited, partly because, you know, Dan is the beast that normally can push that hard and might get a tiny dip, but recovers really fast. And the only time, you know, I've raced with Dan in 40 expedition races, and I've only seen him break like that. I've never seen him break that bad. And I've only seen him break close to that, like twice in so many races. And it almost always has to do with heat. And, you know, we didn't really feel it, you know, because a lot of times when he breaks because of heat, it's on a land trek. And here, like, he kept putting water on his head. So, you know, ostensibly until like the last kilometer of that, he was this amazing engine, and it really wasn't until we hit land. And in all honesty, like, water wouldn't have mattered. Like, we laid in the first water,
essentially.
We laid in water, you know, like 500 meters into that trek, and we just laid there, you know, and then we laid in the next water. And so that became, you know, that was a big tough pill to swallow. It's just that you know, this dude.
When the interesting thing was that the first time that I bonked really bad, I knew it was salt. As soon as I started eating really salty food, I felt much better. And so in this race, I had salt supplements that I was taking. I just hadn't done the math of, I'm drinking 6 liters of water on the paddle. Therefore, I need to be consuming 120 grams of salt.
Right. A lot of salt.
That's an insane amount of salt.
And is your normal thing S caps, or do you like a certain drink mixture?
I've used Elite for most of the time, but I'm done. Like, any salt that you can taste, your body will reject. So the model that I've been doing for the last 5 years is basically calories in a bottle, pure water in a bladder, and salt supplementation in like a dropper with Elite in it.
Yeah.
Right. And that works really well because you can gauge each of the 3 things depending on how you go. And even when your stomach is messed up, super salty and clear water tastes great, but 1% salinity water tastes awful.
Yeah, it's hard to keep.
But you can't drink enough salt water.
There's a drink called Refix, which I don't like because it's like 1,000% salt. Have you tried that?
Right.
No,
but what I'm going to try, what I'm going to try, I just ordered just salt in like caplets, right? Like just sea salt in a gel cap. Yeah. So you don't taste it at all. And that's, I think, the only way for me to be able to get the grams of salt that I need, right? Like, because it's crazy. Like, you know, it's funny, I started doing, you know, pickling and stuff when the pandemic hit. And so I'm mixing all of these 2% salt solutions, and just seeing how much salt you need to make a 2% salt solution. Right. And so to make an isotonic 1% or 0.9% solution, you need half that, but that's still so much salt. It's crazy.
So,
and you know, it's different because Dan knows this, and I mean, you know, you saw him on the video, like he sweats. He's a huge dude. He's a huge engine. So most of the rest of us on the team don't have, like, you know, like I've never bonked that hard. Like when I bonk, it you know, or when I fall apart, it happens. They drag me along for a while, and I'm recovered, right? You know, with Dan, it was close to the edge. Like, luckily, we've done a lot of crazy adventures together, and we really trust each other. So we got to the top of that mountain, and when Dan was having seizures, and, like, you know, his voice was like a 2-year-old kid, and like, I mean, it was pretty scary. But we also had the knowledge that we've got a radio, we've got, you know, helicopter support if we need it. But the last thing we wanted to do was drop out of this thing.
But realistically, the next step is coma, death.
Yeah.
Right. Like the like order of symptoms is where I was, coma, death. And it's just like, it's nasty. Like you don't want to go there.
So I'm hoping a lot of folks in the adventure world listen to this, but I know a lot of my base audience is obstacle racing and are not familiar with, and there's been a lot of questions about rules. And I have a question. You know, the longest race we kind of have is this thing called World's Toughest Mudder, and it's 24 hours long. And you can go into the medical tent to get warm, but they have rules like over so many minutes. but they say, you know, if we give you an IV, you're out.
Yeah.
And we saw all this help going on because many people are in life-threatening situations,
right?
Whether it's cold or they fucking fell and infection. And so what are the normal rules around adventure racing in terms of the help you can receive before one is deemed disqualified?
Right.
Well, so there's a spectrum, right? There's races where teams got IV bags and didn't have a time penalty. But the normal thing is like hour-and-a-half penalty per IV bag.
No, hold on. So this was a like, it's great that you're bringing this up, because in the World Series, or like the kind of the body of the sport, this happened for a while and it was super unclear, just because adventure races are awesome because every race is different, but it also was a struggle because all the rules were different, right? And so you'd have teams going to a race and having the top team pushing so hard, walking in, getting, you know, their crumbling member an IV or two IV bags, and then going on to win the race. And then you have other teams that don't think that's fair, or don't get the same attention, or the medical supplies run out. So now in the World Series, they have pretty like strong restrictions, and they're moving towards the idea that you can get medical treatment, and doctors will help you and give you advice, but the team has to do it, or at least the team has to provide it from their own kit, right? Because for a while, like, people would walk into tents and say, oh, my feet are messed up because I haven't taken care of them. And then the doctors spend, you know, all this equipment and you know, tape their feet up and say, okay, go. And that is, you know,
usually poorly, by the way.
That's a part of the sport that is kind of trying to find the level playing field, because if you know that, you can just push so much harder and then walk in. I think, you know, this race is a little bit unclear. I know they weren't giving IV bags to people, or if they would have pulled you out. But yeah, you see the scenes where there's the near hypothermic person, or, you know, when Sonya from Team Iron Cowboy, like, they put her in a car in front of a heater.
I saw that. That one was jumped out at me a little bit too. Like, oh, she's in a car? Like, she's in somebody's car.
Right. And the tricky thing is that, you know.
By the way, doesn't make her a bad person. I'm set up to interview her for this show. Doesn't make her a bad person. But again, this level of care, I wanted to know where the line was.
Well, and the reality is, and almost always, it's never racers purposefully taking advantage. Like, when you're hammered out there and hurting, and you walk into the medical tent to get assessed, and they say, hey, let us treat you, or lay down on this bed. Like, of course you're going to do it. Like, you're not even thinking, oh, am I going to get disqualified or what? Because the staff is offering the help. So what I think needs to be cleared up, and, you know, like, we try to be really clear in what we call America's Toughest Race, which is the race that we put on, the adventure race in Oregon, is like, we're learning from this and trying to be really, really clear with what medical assistance is, and put the onus, you know, just because our background is expeditions where nobody's helping you, right? And so I want to see more of that, where it's the team taking care of the team. And if the medical has to step in, like, you can keep racing, but you're ranked differently.
Right. And again, so in our world, in the obstacle racing, that's typically the rule. Like, a racer can give you food, right? Or even a disqualified racer can give you their gear or food. But once we help you, you're out. And the only time it was addressed in the show was it the first episode where the one team couldn't get across, or the second team, like, hey, the helicopter was over them, and they were like, if we help you, you're out. And they were like, fine, we're out. And that's the only time it was sort of addressed. And I know people have talked about the Kiwis. We've already addressed that in another episode, but I'll go ahead and address it on this one. That my understanding is, if it's your own equipment that fails, you're fucked. But if it's equipment provided by the race and it fails, they are going to help you, you know, in the Kiwis case, get a new boat.
Right. And that's, yeah, I mean, that, you know, when I started seeing those comments online, you know, it's, because certainly when you're out there racing and you hear about this, like, oh, somebody had a mechanical or something, because that's part of the sport, right? That's part of the, you know, the expedition. There's, you know, there was another question, which, you know, they're super good friends of mine, and I don't super know that I agree with the decision, but this is the great, like, one of the teams, that Canadian team, Team Atlas, I mean, they basically are been racing. They race with us all the time, but they dropped an ascender on the falls. Like, they were halfway up the falls, or at some point getting ready to go on the falls, and they dropped one of their ascenders to the bottom of the waterfall, right? Which in an expedition, if you were doing that, like you're done. Like you can't.
Wait a minute, what's an ascender?
So, you know, the ropes, like the big waterfall that everybody had to climb on the ropes, right? The ascenders are the pieces of equipment that attach you to the ropes and keep you alive and slide up the rope one way and don't come down. And you have two of them, so your safety, so you can go one up and then hang on the other, you know, and you do that for 1,000 feet. It's exhausting. There's lots of techniques, but if you lose an ascender, right, like technically on an expedition, if you lost an ascender, your choice is to go down and either get it or be done.
So they're somehow popped off, you're saying?
They dropped it while they were putting it on.
Right.
Like they just were clumsy with when they're handing them around or getting set up, and they're their own equipment. And, you know, and they were like the race staff just gave them another one. Right. And it's not really talked about, and like, you know,
no penalty assessed.
No penalty assessed or anything, which is, you know, it's a small thing, but I think in this sport, like I love the sport and I love what Amazon did and I love the energy, and it was a tremendous race, but you know, I think we do see these questions come up, especially as it gets more and more competitive. Like these teams are out there to win.
Well, Dan and I were talking a little bit while we were waiting for you, and I do understand that a television program is never the same as just an event because producers have an entertainment to produce. And it feels like, as far as these things go, they did a pretty good job considering, you know, Burnett is like, this is what he's all about, right? As opposed to say American Ninja Warrior, where, you know, we're going to give you the 20 people that have cancer, right? Like that's the show we're going to show you because that's what we want to do. And we can do whatever we want. We can make up rules. We can do whatever we want. Maybe Ninja's a bad example. I don't know. Anyhow, so how you guys have been doing these for how long?
I've been doing them for 15 years, 16 years, and Jay like 20, 25.
Not 25, not that old, 20.
No.
Yeah.
And this overall event, start to finish, was as hard as they normally are, easier than they normally are, somewhere in the middle than they normally
I
are.
would say it's in some ways, like, I mean, obviously my experience was like worst ever in my experience personally. As far as
in terms of the terrain, what you had to physically do,
the terrain was pretty brutal, but the legs were relatively short, right? So
this section is the most brutal part of the course. It's going to take some real grit to get through this section. Man. Sorry.
It did. It legit did, right?
The swim, the swim that he talks about, like every team, like that, it was just freezing. Like you weren't expecting it. And this was definitely on the upper tier of courses for difficulty, right? The couple things that it had going for it is it, like if this would have been a World Series race, it would have been open for 7 days, not 11. Right. And you would have had a finishing percentage of maybe 18, 20 teams max, not 44. Right. I mean, the number of teams that finished on that 11th day. And so, you know, and I think, you know, honestly, well, I know that there was, it surprised the producers, right? It surprised a lot of people from Amazon and the production team because they haven't been in the sport since 2002, right?
But I thought they had been.
No, I mean, like, you know, Kevin and Lisa and you know, they're amazing producers, but they haven't been, like Nathan's been in the sport, the racers have been in the sport, but the people that put this race on haven't really been in adventure racing since they stopped. And what happened, you know, if you look at the old eco challenges on TV, they introduce teams like Mike Closer. They're like, he's a mountain biker and his team is a mountain biker, a climber, like a trail runner, and that's their team. And right now in this eco challenge, the top 30 teams that were in this race, they're adventure racers. Like they're not self-identified as mountain bikers or climbers or anything. They are adventure racers. And so you had these people that are coming to the pinnacle of the world's toughest race of their sport, and they've been training for it literally for 15 years, not one, right? And they've been refining the teamwork techniques, they've been refining the speed, the navigation, and so all of a sudden you get this team that produces what they you saw it in the opening episodes. I don't know if anybody's going to finish this race, right? And there are definitely those of us that are thinking like, I don't know that that's possible. Like I've been to tough races that seem impossible, and some of these teams finish. Like we went into this race, and it wasn't a question of will we finish this race? It was a question of where will we finish this race? When will we finish this race?
When you hit the starting line day one, or when you're in the camps, whatever they have you staying at some fancy hotel beforehand, was the conversation like, all right, we know the Kiwis are here, we know these other big boys are here, we're in it to win it, or a podium would be great, or a top 10 would be great? Where were you before the race started in terms of what you thought you wanted to have happen?
I mean, our goals, like as a team, were pretty clear. A lot of people have asked that. Will be like, oh, at the last, we wanted to stay friends. We don't even have to say that anymore because we've raced together long enough. We know that's going to happen. But yeah, our goals were 3: win it, top 5, and then top American team. And the top American team was like our last ditch thing. Like, because we know that like when we push hard, like, well, everybody, you saw it happen to a couple other teams. Team Summit that was up there in the front and then drop back. Like these elite teams, and we're among them. Like it's for us to beat the Kiwis. We know, and Rob Preston said this too. It's like it takes the Cinderella race, right? And we also know that we have to take those chances. Like that we have to go out hard. We trained our butts off in the outrigger because we knew that a lot of teams wouldn't, and we love paddling. Dan and I especially. Like we were down there, 4 or 5 mornings a week, just paddling in loops on this flat river, like little 2-mile loops in this outrigger.
Sounds super fun.
Yeah.
It actually really was.
It got to be pretty fun.
It was pretty fun. Outrigger is amazing.
But so, that was, we definitely, and I'll be honest, we now race to win. We are not the most successful team at winning. We've in the last 5 or 10 years, we've done better and better and won some major races and had some more podiums. But like for us, it's not about seeing if we can finish.
Well, no, I know it's not that, as it was for many of the new teams, but I still wanted to know if you were out there knowing these guys are the best in the world, and but like you said, so that sort of explains you're like, hey, it would take for us a lot of things to go right. So let's get to once Dan gets his wits about him, which was however many hours later, and you knew you could start passing teams. Then did the goal change to just, all right, well, let's just see how many we can pass, or, hey, we still want to see if we can be best American team? Where was the secondary goal kind of once you got reconnoitered there?
We had a lot of conversations out there, and it kind of shifted around. And one of the challenges that we had during this race was around kind of goal setting, because it's much easier for me to say, let's go as fast as we can. And it's much easier, or it's easier for me and Mel to say and mean, like, let's go as fast as we can. And then it's much easier for Jason and Steven to say, like, we need to catch this team. We need to beat them. We need to be number 1. We need to be number 4, whatever we're racing for some position. And so that caused quite a bit of conflict, because when we're saying, okay, like, let's go, because we're not like targeting some placement, like Jason and Steven would kind of be like, well, we need to be pushing for whatever place. And we're just like, okay, but let's just go faster. And then when Steven and Jason, like if we just haven't passed a team or seen a team in a while, like Jason and Steven would kind of go into this funk of like, what's going on? Like, I don't see the carrot right in front of me. Like, it's easy to lose hope of like passing the team that's 8 hours ahead of you, right? You're just like, how's that going to happen? And so it just took a really long time for us to really settle into the like, let's push hard and let's see what we can do. Realistically, that happened right before the last paddle. Like we kind of just put our heads together.
Well, I think we had different experiences, to be honest.
Right.
Because for that first, for us, that first 72 hours was how can we keep racing with Dan? Right. Like I think I said it somewhere when, I didn't even know that we were on camera, when Steve and I are like hiking out of the boat and we're just like, we're kind of beside ourselves. We're like, we can't we can't pull Dan through Fiji. Like we can't pull him across Fiji.
He's too fat.
He's too, yeah, well, whatever. You know,
is that what you were trying to say? I mean, that's not my words. I would never say that about
no,
Dan.
Basically, he's too hairy. That it's all kinds of stuff. But yeah, it's and we and so we were trying to figure out what to do. And then once he started to come back, Steven and I think this took the longest. Like when we were talking out there, like I'm okay setting a goal like to win or to be top 5 or top American team and failing, right? And I think the big disconnect was like for me to try to do that and to set that out there as a goal and to give everything toward that goal and then to fail, that's okay. Like I'm not upset by that, right? And I think that was harder, right, in the conversations.
My take is a little bit different, and that is that when you're tired, I blame your poor choice of goals. And when I'm tired, you blame my poor choice of goals.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So like when I'm on fire, we're hauling ass.
Yeah.
And when you're on fire, we're hauling ass.
Yeah.
And when we're not, it's like you're not competitive enough, or
like or you're going too fast.
Your eyes are on first place, and like what are you doing? Like just take a step in front of you. And that's really the thing that kind of took a long time to circle in on, because we're like, I mean, he lives next door, right? Like we talk all the time.
Yeah.
We're like super in sync and super like connected. And it took us like 10 years to reach that conclusion, right? It's like, it's just a really delicate balancing act, right? Because there's so much in the moment that you can always point to, right? Yeah. It's like, you enter this race with 2 cracked ribs, or like I got heat stroke on the first day, or like, whatever the set of things are, it's really difficult to see through to the underlying thing that we can actually get our teeth around, right? And I think what we're aiming to do for next time, and kind of as we continue racing together, is like, no, whatever goals motivate you are great. Like, when you feel, let's focus on you feeling good and pursuing your goals to the best of your ability. And let's focus on me, achieving my goals to the best of my ability. And they're pointed in the same direction, right? That was the most frustrating thing for me in this race, is like, our goals are pointed in exactly the same direction. Finish this race as fast as we can. Yeah. Right. And to get the guff from Jason and Steven about like, well, you should be targeting first place. I'm like, I just want to finish as fast as I can. I don't know what that means. I don't care what that means, but it means I want to go faster right now. And so it's like, it was a very weird kind of circling in on this thing. And finally, as we're getting on the boats for the final paddle, we're 2 hours behind, maybe more, 2 hours behind the actual first place American team at the time. So we were 2 hours behind our goal, entering a long paddle section that was only like 8 hours, something like that.
It was only 8 hours, he says.
I mean, so paddling, you're lucky to get a 2% advantage, right?
Well, no, he's saying 8 hours is not.
Well, but to make up 2 hours.
I'm saying to normal humans, hey, you're going to paddle for about 8 hours. And to you, it's like, this one's just 8 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and where that's coming from. Yeah, right.
I mean, eventually they'll put paddling in OCR. The mud will be so deep that they'll give you like a little Billy, and then it'll be a thing. And you guys will, I mean,
but like if you had asked us to rate the likelihood of passing a team that was 2 hours ahead of us on an 8 hour leg, the answer would be 0. Right. No chance. Never gonna happen.
You did.
We did, and we passed them by a country mile. Yeah. Right. We gained 3 hours total on them on an 8 hour leg. Right.
So we ended up an hour.
We smashed it to a degree that I'm still super tickled by. Right.
That's great. So Jason, have you seen the whole show or not?
I've seen up to episode 7.
Okay.
So we had to stop after the waterfall. My wife and I got to watch that together. So we're gonna finish it tonight.
Well,
but I know what happened, at least to us. So.
Well, but the reason I want to ask is because they showed. So the Kiwis decided specifically before that section, like, we're not resting, we're going ahead, and they want to get some big lead. And then it turns out by the next day it was an hour lead. So they lost all this time. Is that pretty normal? Is that how it kind of goes? You just sort of are, gambling on sleep versus, because I was like, why'd they skip sleeping? They did that really hard thing at night. It probably would have gone much faster in the day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And this is, this is where, to me, the sport is amazing. Like, because, not to take away, like, I started out as a triathlete. I did some OCR before it was even called OCR. And, the thing that got me into adventure racing and hooked me from all that is that, we all talk about running a smart race, whether you're doing a triathlon or OCR or anything, but this is like running a smart race, like in an extreme element. Like, you're making big choices that have huge consequences. And we've all been there, where you think you can get through something, you're looking at the map and you're like, yeah, we can push ahead and get this. And that was a hard section to do at night. As you know, we got lost there at night. And it just, we talk about that a lot. There's a lot of times you're racing where good teams will make a decision and look at their pace. And I think the Kiwis probably, in retrospect, if that would have been a not necessarily the best choice for them. But again,
how many hours are left in the night.
But mentally, it also they're smart enough to know that if they are in front, like, nobody really knows how far ahead they're in front, right? And so even if they're not that far in front, when these other teams wake up and somebody says, oh, the Kiwis left 5 hours ago, right? Once you're off that back, like, it's hard. Like, this is kind of the thing that Dan was just talking about. When you're off that back and you don't know how far behind you are and it feels impossible to catch up, a lot of times that's that competitiveness skill that starts to fail, right? And I guarantee that there was a point, and you kind of see it in the show, where the second and third place and a bunch of those teams chasing them, they literally gave up and they started fighting for the table scraps that were left on the Eco Challenge, right? Because they had assumed that the Kiwis were going to win the race.
Well, if 50,000 is table scraps for second, sure.
Well, but yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, is you want to make sure you get your scraps, right?
Right.
So.
But it seems to be a regular occurrence that somebody at some point is going to get lost for 3 or 4 hours. Like, that seems to be kind of normal for all teams, though.
4, 5, or 6. Yeah. And it becomes, we talk a lot about, especially when we coach people and train people, that there's 2 subsets of things you're looking at. One, you're trying to make less mistakes, right? You're trying to become better navigators, like better logistics, and make less mistakes. And the idea is to run this perfect race without any mistakes, but that never happens. And so then the other important skill that I don't think people put enough time in, and you see this with some of the newer teams, is how to recognize mistakes early and rectify them. Because it doesn't, like, if all you do is when you fail in a race, you're like, next time we're not going to make that mistake. Well, that's bullshit. You're going to make that mistake or more mistakes. And the more important skill than avoiding mistakes, and what New Zealand is so good at, is taking their mistakes, recognizing them, adapting, and then not thinking about it, not beating themselves up over it.
So I'm pretty sure it was you, at one point, you're looking at your little compass there.
Yeah.
And you were like, this does not make sense.
Yeah.
This should be there, but it's not.
Right.
And I think, to a smaller degree, whether it's in a race or in life, it's been, I know this is the fucking way. And then it turns out that it's not.
Yeah.
So
common.
Right? Because it feels right. It just like, I know that thing is there, and this just feel like we went. And so anyhow, how
you want it to be right. Like, you desperately want it to be right.
I again, people get lost in a 5-mile race, or I've been lost just on my own run in the woods. And I just started going because it just felt right to go down that hill. How could it not be? So what specifically the heck was there that you didn't think was there? And how often does that happen?
I mean, it happens a lot. And we're getting better at, recognizing it. We'll be the first to say that the great thing is, for us watching this, is, it's showing a lot of our struggles and failings front and center, right? And we also look at it and say, man, we we actually held it together and came together as a team and had a tremendous effort to end up where we ended up. And are very proud of that. But you know, we are also look at these things and say, yeah, we've made these mistakes before, and you know, we know that some of the mistakes we made would not have been made outside of Amazon, right? Because when there's cameras, right, and when there's like, there were times we're pushing hard, and you know, the little bit of backstory, they made us seem like we got lost for a whole day, right? Really, we were fine until it got dark. Like, we were trying to get to the base of the waterfall before it got dark, and then it got dark. We were literally probably a kilometer away from the trail that went up to the waterfall.
It's 300 meters around the corner.
But now we can't see anything. We can't see the ridge lines. We're in the jungle. Like, you're stumbling. The river did kind of opened up, so it was not quite as defined. And you know, and we just wanted to be there, right? And you know, we thought, okay, it's only 15 or 20 minutes away. It's nighttime. We're slipping, so you don't know how fast you're going. And then we created this reality, partly because, you know, and we made a really bad decision too. It doesn't show this, but you know how the Kiwis didn't sleep and they went for it through the night. So we got to that camp in the middle of the daytime, and we're like, we should take a sleep card. So we slept in the middle of the hot, like, mosquito buzzing day. We didn't sleep. We laid there for 3 hours of daylight, right?
Yeah.
And so we ended up leaving that camp, trying to get to the waterfall an hour and a half before dark, when we just could have done it all during the daytime. And we could have, like, slept at the base of the fall, slept at the top of the falls, anything. And, you know, and then
slept in the warming time.
Yeah, and then we just ran around and.
But I think the bigger issue that you're kind of hinting at is that there's this gut feeling of where you need to go, and that is the biggest downfall. Yeah. Like, anytime you listen to that, it's wrong, right?
Usually.
Like, if it comes up that you're like, oh, this is probably the way. Like, to me, I back up nav basically.
Yeah.
And for me, anytime that comes up, I have retrained myself to be a signal of look at the map, check the compass, right? Yeah. So anytime I'm like, oh, I think that's the way, I'm just like, let's just check. What's the elevation? What's the slope? What's the, you know, like, there's always concrete things that you can point to, right? What direction am I going? What side is the mountain on? Where's the river? Blah, 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 right? And so by creating this elaborate set of fail safes that work whether or not I'm sleepy or not, you wind up having just much, much more reliable, regular navigation. And the thing that really messed us up in the jungle is Jason and I are working very hard to support each other in that process. And Mel and Steven are not quite on the same program with us.
They don't have as much experience.
And we didn't really talk about it that much. And so they were super worried about the way that the weird thing that the river was doing. Right. And then Jason got concerned about it, and I was like, well, if you're concerned about it, let's figure it out. And then we, spent a bunch of time backtracking and doing all this stuff. We literally, if we had just kept going for another half hour, we would have hit the trail.
Right. And it was, this race in particular was, I loved seeing it because it was a race for TV, and there were things that we didn't, there were parts of the course that were really well marked, but nobody knew that they were marked. The kind of frustrating thing for us was literally, if we kept going up that canyon, it's not even that we had to navigate well to go up to the waterfall canyon. There was a tent and flagging, right? But we're thinking this is going to be really difficult now because there's all these little creeks coming off and you have to pick the right one, and it's very difficult to know. And so this is the same reason Team Summit got lost and Team Eastwind. They all chose the canyon literally 300 or 400 meters before the right canyon. But had anybody known, oh, this is going to be flagged because they want us to be safe, you just would have kept going till you find the flagging. And so
you said the legs were shorter than normal, Dan.
Not shorter than normal. We're just the worst kind of races that are in my memory are basically the Patagonian expedition race, and we had a leg there that was 140 kilometers on foot, packs heavy, no trail whatsoever, and you're just literally bushwhacking for 140 kilometers in the torrential rain, and everything is a spiky bush, right? We emerged out of this thing and we were picking thorns out of our hands for weeks. 2 months later, a thorn this long shot out of my knee, right? Just just horrifying. No, just totally desolate. It was us, one other team that were like making the cutoffs, and then a couple teams behind us that in retrospect wound up being allowed to continue because they were close enough. But just conditions that were just stupid.
I mean, the longest stage in Fiji for us, I think, I don't think there was a stage that was more than 15 hours. And there were a lot of them, and in many ways, like for TV and for racers, like it was one of the most fun races that I've ever done. Like, fun is a weird word, but like it was super excellently executed, like the logistics, and the stages were varied and interesting and fun. And as Bear would say, brutal, but then you'd have a fun stage and then a super brutal stage, but it wasn't forever. And in a lot of the World Championship races or World Series races, you end up with at least one stage that is 36 to 72 hours, which means you're doing the same thing for that long. Yeah. Right. I mean, it's like, and so that to me is like, Fiji certainly tested us emotionally and mentally, especially because of what happened to us. But for the high level teams, there wasn't ever a breaking point that comes when you've been trekking. We've done races where we're trekking in the jungle like that, but you're trekking in the jungle for 40 hours, like and that gets to be like when you go into your second night and your feet are blistered and like you're just like, dude, that's when teams are like, I'm out. Like, how do I get out of here? Like,
and we did a race in New Zealand where there was, I think it was 180K, the long Southland trek.
Yeah,
and you're carrying a boat in your backpack,
raft,
boats and paddles for whitewater in your pack for like
72 hours,
insanely far.
Yeah,
and it's just like you get to the end of it, and the last section of that, the easy final part, was 50K on a trail, right?
Just nice little 50K jog there at the end. Right.
Yeah, after and so Fiji was, I think, and it also keeps the viewers, right, and it kept the people, the racers loved it. Like, I don't know any race that I talked to that said that you had to do hard stuff, but then you get the whitewater rafting, then you get the ropes, then you get to the jungle was intense, but man, it was beautiful. Like for me, if as much as I love the suffering, if there's more of that kind of race, especially pulling in people from triathlon and OCR, like, I don't know, like there were some tough athletes out there from other sports, but if they had gone to a race that had a 70-hour leg of one thing, I mean, you're just like, I don't know, like, who's going to do that?
What is this World Series you keep talking about?
I mean, it's I'm sure, OCR went through the same kind of thing where there were a lot of obstacle course races, and then it got, codified, or it seems like there's 2 OCR organizations now. I don't know. I've kind of kept track, but adventure racing as it grew post Eco Challenge, eventually got a governing body, and became the Adventure Racing World Series. And there's a national organization and a bunch of, there's a European organization, but the World Series is basically, it's a series of 10 to 12 expedition, like Eco Challenge, but expedition level races that are around the world. And then every year there's a world championship that moves locations, right? And so it's, and you have to qualify for world championships by, getting, a top spot in one of the qualifying races, and it's got prize money and all that stuff. So that's basically where, when somebody talks to you about Nathan and Team New Zealand having, been the most won team in the history of the sport, they've won 6 or 7 world championships in the last 8 years. Like, they've just won everything. So right now the world championships is more about like who gets second and third. If they go, it's and they're just tremendous. And I'm, part of me is like happy that I'm a few years younger than Nathan. So I'm like, at some point,
he's going to stop.
He's going to stop. And then I have 1 year, right, or 2 years.
But yeah, I mean, it's difficult to understate the level of experience that team has, right? Just like experience and physicality.
Yeah.
Like between them, like that particular squad, I think, has won world championships before.
So my understanding that because OCR is born out of adventure racing.
Yeah.
Joe DeSena says, adventure racing is really expensive. What if we gave people this like little taste of it? What if we made this like 5 mile version? And then he did the death race, which is this whole other thing.
Yeah. I know the whole history.
So my understanding that we've all heard about here in OCR is adventure racing was this huge thing. It had all these sponsors. You could find, the old ones on YouTube. Yeah. And then one day they magically stopped and we never heard of it again until you guys came along. So what's been happening since 2002?
I mean, it's actually been a really exciting past couple of years. We've started having a resurgence in the United States. But for the last 10 years, there have been tons of races worldwide. Just America has been very much behind the curve. And I think it's interesting. I don't totally understand why it has been as difficult. I assume that it's like something simple, like it's hard to get permits for this weird sport. We've definitely struggled with that.
Really, yeah.
And if it weren't for Jay's dedication, like these races would be totally impossible. Like the number of times going into, like a permitting office, trying to explain what's happening and try to figure out like how this particular person needs to be convinced that, no, we're not going to destroy his favorite trail. We're not going to because all of the concerns about adventure racing from the permitting side are not really connected with reality, right? We're talking 100 people spread out over 72 hours, right? Like this is not impactful, period.
Right.
And so I think it's something simple, like there's no cultural awareness, and maybe that'll get easier with Eco Challenge.
But the reality is, I think as well, I have a twin brother who's also a pretty prolific racer, and he used to run a bunch of races in North Dakota, including a bunch of obstacle course races. And he was not really a fan of obstacle course races compared to adventure races. And then as an event organizer, like he'd run these obstacle course races, and they would be the most attended events of any events he put on all year. And he's like, but so he kind of started to get like really into that world. And one of the things that he kind of started to know, because most obstacle course races are solo. You can race with a team if you want to, right? But most of the elite,
most of them are solo, yes.
Right, solo. And there's something that is, with the team aspect, like you have the benefit of having people to rely on when you're out there. But for most people getting into the sport, that's not the reality. What they have is they have somebody else to blame, right? Like most rookie teams, it takes them a while before they realize that the team is actually an asset, right? To get to the New Zealand level. And what happens is you have these teams crossing over from OCR triathlon and they're super tough, and they get into these, toughest races or these big expedition races, especially when there's media involved, and they have such an easy out. Like I remember there was a team of some OCR and super triathletes that came to the Patagonia expedition race in 2016 or something. Yeah. They made this big thing on, they're like, we're going to be the first American team to ever win the Patagonia expedition race. Like, and I remember like, that's awesome. I called them up and say, hey, do you want to consult? We've been there 5 times. We've been on the podium, every time we've been there. This is a really tough race. Like the finishing rate is like under 20%. And they're like, oh no, we got this famous triathlon coach and we're going to smash it. Right. I'm like, okay, cool.
Take a guess. How long do you think they made it through?
Less than a day.
Yep. Under 12 hours. They didn't make it off the first stage. Right. And
can you tell me who it was?
I can find out, but they're
PRS Fit.
PRS Fit was the name of their team. Like
what was it?
PRS Fit. I don't know. You can probably look it up.
Well, the people in obstacle racing, were bummed that, Team Canada Adventure didn't get any airtime. And what I try to explain is I said, listen, I'm sure that people come along all the time and think they're going to do great. People come into our sport all the time, like some Olympian or some whatever, and they can't do like the first obstacle. Yeah. So I said, no one's going to take them seriously. Now they might, but their first time out, it doesn't matter how amazing, quote unquote, an athlete you are. Right. They're not going to think that they're going to compete against, you guys that have been doing this for 20 fucking years. So I'm not surprised at all they didn't get a lot of airtime.
Well, but the other thing is that, so you may not have thought that we knew, right? But it wasn't. I knew nothing about. Now I know about Ryan and Rhea, but is it Rhea or Rhea? How do you?
Rhea Coble.
Yeah. And I got to talk to them after the race, but like we knew going into the race, but it wasn't because of them. It was because of Bob Miller, right? So they're like, the reality is in adventure racing, it doesn't take all 4 people being really good adventure racers. Like Kiwis, the Kiwis are lucky because that's what they've all identified with for the last 20 years. But having 1 person or 2 people that know what the fuck they're doing, right? They, and no discredit to Ryan and Rhea, right? But, they did so well because when things got weird, they had Bob Miller, who is like one of the best racers in the world outside of Nathan and his crew, saying, this is how we're going to do it, or this is what we need to focus on, right? Because we've seen athletes of their caliber come into racing and more often than not fail, not because of their fitness, but fail because of their teamwork, their unknown, their sleep deprivation, feet, but they've got Bob. And so we knew as soon as I heard, oh man, he got 2 top, is it 2? Who was the other one was an adventure racer, right?
I'm not familiar with who that person was.
Yeah. So that's Bob's buddy that he raced with a bunch. So like you've got 2 top adventure racers that have just been retired for a couple of years. And then you've got 2 top OCR. And so we were like, we knew from the very beginning when I was looking at the team list, I was like, all right, so they're going for the win and they can do it.
And I would say not just top OCR, but the best, again, the longest we go is 24 hours.
Yeah.
And Ryan is the undisputed king. He's won it 5 times, and he's won it 3 times by himself and 4 times on a team. And Rhea's run it twice by herself. So really the best, not just towards the top, but the best. But again, like you said, that doesn't mean you can navigate 7 days in the jungle.
Right.
So again, I'm not surprised that the camera people weren't like, oh, let's follow Ryan and Rhea because they've won a couple of races in OCR.
Right.
And I think what's interesting is like the skill, the non-navigator, non-captain skills are super important, but they're also pretty easy to communicate, right? It's like figure out who's hurting, help them, have random fun like snacks, like have caffeine, know how to like deal with blisters. Like it's just a pretty small set of things that,
and to be tough, right?
Totally. But like it's pretty easy in principle to come in as a great 3rd or 4th member once you have a solid navigator and a solid backup navigator and a captain. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't surprise me if they were able to kind of like pick up those things, but to be a real asset on the team. I didn't hear much. I mean, we mostly talked about Bob's last couple of years. We didn't talk to him about his team dynamics. So I don't know exactly what happened out there.
I mean, I'm sure it sounds like I talked to Ryan a bunch, and I mean, I don't know if he's like, he's also top, sometimes it's hard to we've been trying to get Max King, who had a short stint in like winning a bunch of OCR stuff. He's local to Bend, to come out and race with us. And it's hard because like he's winning and making money and doing amazing stuff, just like Ray and Ryan. And so I think, I don't know if you've talked to them, but I think Rhea is a little more hooked or wants to do more.
Yeah, she already did another one. She just did another one.
Oh, she did? Where?
Yeah.
Like, where are they having races?
I don't know, because I remember I was trying to get them on the show, and she was like, oh, I've got to do another adventure race. Hang on, let me look really quickly.
Yeah, what the heck? I want to.
But again, there's a lot of, and I'm sure we might see some apply, right, for the show, the next one. And they'll be like, oh yeah, we can definitely. And again, like you're talking about, like the caliber is pretty different. Ryan is the kind of guy that's going to knock out like 10 FKTs during COVID, and like then get on his bike and ride it across some Canadian. Ryan's just one of those guys. He's also, he's like a fucking engineer, super bright guy. You know what I mean? He's someone you would want on your team, like for regardless. Sure. He's just, but again, I still didn't expect them to podium. I still did not expect them, knowing you guys that do this year in, year out, for the last however many years. It's just a different thing.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, if you put a team of 4 OCR, like if it had been Ryan and Rhea and 2 other OCR badasses that had done this all as rookies, right? They would have probably ended up closer to where Iron Cowboy did, right?
Which was
just finishing, but like 36th or
right. Got it.
Like,
exactly, because like that's actually a really good example, right? Because those guys are all super fit, but none of them had done it before.
Right, and so
I think one big difference between the Iron Cowboys and probably the OCR stuff is the amount of awkward terrain that we cover. So I think OCR is probably a significantly better like background skill set to have, right? Because the amount of slipping on rocks and powering through mud and jumping over jungle logs.
Fiji was basically a giant OCR in the jungle.
Totally, it's just a giant OCR.
Reyes was short. It was called Never Summer 24 Hour. Do you know what that is?
Okay. Yeah. We know that's so Katie's the race director, so she's a good friend of ours. Yeah. So I knew that she was actually hopefully going to come out and do Expedition Oregon with Katie. So I don't know if that'll still happen, but oh, that's cool. So she went down to do that. Was the only adventure race happening in the US right now. It just happened last weekend or something, 2 weeks ago.
Well, OCR has been shut down, but trail and ultra is starting to come back because much fewer people. People are spread out.
Yeah.
So I would assume that's maybe similar for you guys.
Yeah, we're planning. So the plug, the America's Toughest Race, Expedition Oregon, will happen in May, 2021. And I'm not going to say, I just wouldn't expect it to be much easier, if at all, than Eco. It's a little bit shorter, but
I mean, for you guys putting on races.
No, that's the race we put on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you said Patagonia. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Oh no. So Patagonia is the next Eco, but we put on Expedition Oregon, which is part of the World Series race in May. Right. So that's
how many days is that one?
That is 6 days.
Okay. So does that mean the cutoff is 6 days and most teams finish in 4, or how does that usually
6
go?
days, we expect the leaders to finish in 4.5. It's about 300 miles, so 450K.
Okay.
We've got a pretty full field, which is great. So
lots of eco redemption.
Yeah, lots of eco redemption teams. We've got some of a lot of the top U.S. teams and a bunch of international teams coming.
So these races that are part of the World Series, is it the governing body just like you have to apply for it? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, we applied. Like, we've been racing for a long time, so we obviously know the organization, and we've been race directing like up to 36-hour races with our Bend Racing Company, and then we just were able to apply and do what they call the demonstration race to prove viability and like race direction and organization, and we did that, and it was super successful, and so then we put on one in 2019. That was super successful and sold out, and so obviously the 2021 got canceled. But we've been trying to, like, my mission, because I come from a technical climbing and mountaineering background, expeditions and stuff. So the last race we did, we actually had the only race that's ever been done that had technical rock climbing. Like, forget about the ascending. Like, this was people with their own ropes climbing a 500-foot wall to get to a tiny summit, and if they didn't know how to climb it, they couldn't get the checkpoint. So like ropes, harnesses, like clipping in.
Middle of the night.
Some of the teams were doing it in the middle of the night. It was amazing. We've got some footage of it, and so that was pretty exciting. So we're trying to put in more, like, not just adventure endurance aspects, but more expedition technical aspects, like either mountaineering or because there've been a couple races out there. Like, there was a race in Alaska that had technical mountaineering, crossing glaciers, and I'm betting that the next Eco Challenge is going to have some glacier work. So like ropes and crampons and ice axe, and you better know what the fuck you're doing, or like
you'll die.
Yeah, or you're going to fall in the crevasse. And
that is kind of what I thought adventure racing, what I had heard was more like a lot more of the rope stuff, right? Like either going up or
honestly.
What do you call it?
Tyrolean.
Well, and the Tyrolean, but and we love that, and it makes great TV. But the reality is, you know, it does, you know, it's, we know why Amazon makes these choices, but when they call what we did at Vua Falls rock climbing, we're just kind of like, no, that's rope work, right? Yeah. That's the same kind of stuff an arborist does. That's the same kind of stuff like ascending and rescue. Like the ropes are already there. So what I'm really interested in as a race director is making people do stuff on their own, right? Like we'll make them blow up their pack rafts and paddle a class 4 canyon without guides, and then get to our area and then like pull out the ropes from wherever they're hiding them in their boats and like climb up that tower.
Right. Well, so the fact that the teams that DNF were literally just like, send us the chopper, I assume that's not at every race.
No.
I'm guessing that's really expensive to do that.
Yeah. I mean, we'll drive a car to the closest reasonable like place
and send somebody
and send somebody in to try to help, you know, but realistically, like there's just no way. Right. Like there was a race in Alaska where there were 4 or 5 helicopter rescues, and that race director is still paying off the bill.
Yeah.
Right.
It was an amazing race, but probably
totally
like, you know, if you're going to have a historical thing, that was the most difficult race I've ever done as far as like actual danger.
Right.
And
well, I do want to talk about the like embedded video guys, because, you know, in episode 2, I think it was 2, maybe 3, where the Estonia folks kind of got trapped, and everywhere else the race was like, you know, shut down. Yeah. And it did occur to me even before they showed it, like, oh, by the way, that poor camera guy is stuck there with them.
When you can see as they're crossing the river that the first crew goes across as 2, and then the second one is like the camera guy is holding on to the guys and hoping that they make it through. So the camera guys were amazing.
So when they would go off with you, let's say, okay, we're starting the next leg, and they can't tell you anything, and they can't tell you if you're going the right way or not, but was their instruction, as far as you know, like, all right, you're with these guys until they finish this leg, and then they just have their own food and
totally independent.
Have, you know, and the reality is, like, you know, we know that that's part of it. We've done, you know, probably like Jeff was the guy that we got to know because he followed us on several legs. When I got the team lost, Jeff was right there with us. And I'm like, dude, I felt almost as bad for this poor guy, right? Because like the whole team knows what's up. Like they, you know, we've all signed up for it. We know getting lost is part of it. You know, we know that. And then this guy that's like hiked longer than he has on the slippery rocks, he's getting blisters and he's like carrying all this gear. And I'm like, yeah, okay, sorry, we're in the wrong canyon. We got to go back down. We're looking around. It's the middle of the night. Everybody's tired. And I'm like, oh, this poor guy. But we also, you know, like one of my favorite experiences was we did the Patagonia Expedition race in 2018, which we'd been trying to win for years. And I went back with my wife and 2 of the other guys that were in eco, because Dan had just had a kid. But for some reason, we were just like, we're gonna do it. We're gonna take a media team. They're gonna document our efforts because, you know, we just lost spirit, and so there's a lot of emotional stuff. And we've been going to this race for a long time, and we had a camera guy. This is one of those legs. It was a 72-hour trek through the mountains, huge, like no checkpoints. It was like there was a checkpoint at the start, checkpoint at the end, and you're doing, you know, 120 kilometers through massive mountains. And the camera guy was like, I want to come with you guys. And we're just like, seriously? Okay. And he, you know, essentially became like, he was just filming and he did a great job. And then we're on top of this mountain ridge in the, like, so far from civilization, and the winds are 100 miles an hour. We've chosen this route that stays on top of the ridge, you know, and we can't stand up. Like we're crawling up the mountain to not blow off, and we can't leave him behind. Right. So like, you know, it was really amazing. So we're like, you know, all linking arms and going, and, you know, and he got so sleep deprived. You know, we finally made it to the end. We navigate through the night. He gets amazing footage because he's just a, you know, amazing professional and a badass himself. And then I remember coming down to the end of that leg, and it's this steep climb down this mountain. It's been muddy and horrible. And he's falling asleep with all his camera gear, and he like trips and he's tumbling down this mountain with like camera gear going everywhere. And we have to go pick him up and like, dude, you can make it. And so like he became the member of the team, right? That we're just like, we gotta get the thing, right? And it was remarkable because it went from a team of 4, like, you know, and into this, but he had to do stuff. We'd stop to sleep, and he wouldn't get to go to sleep because he's like filming us, like set up our little tents and like talk and then pass out. And then he asks us how long we're going to sleep, and he has to wake up 20 minutes before us. So he gets a tiny amount of sleep to like set up the camera to capture us, like getting up before the sunrise. And like, and we just didn't, you know, he just was doing it. We're like, dude, that was pretty badass. He was like, yeah, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. But, and so the camera guys out there in Eco were, you know, oh God, it was
there
so.
Camera women?
Yeah, there were a couple camera women, but they were like the camera people out there were unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you know, they don't get much credit, and they're also getting paid. So, you know, but I think it's worth, you know, I think it's great to talk about because we were super impressed with.
We invited him to do any of our races.
Yeah, we were just like, come,
bring a team.
If you don't want to, you don't get to bring
on
a camera.
the house.
But,
yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to see him, you know, really gut it out in some of those sections with us.
Yeah.
I think it's not till the last episodes, you may not have seen it yet, but there's this thing that happens where a bunch of teams kind of end up bunched up there at the back, and they're just kind of like, one team kind of figured out where to go, and so everybody just sort of followed them. And I wanted to know if that was normal. The teams usually kind of pair up at any point.
Yes.
Pairing up is common. The other thing that's really common is like there's a hard checkpoint, and you'll get like first team on the scene is like looking around, second team on the scene, everybody's looking around, third team on the scene looking around, and we've had like as many as 10 teams just like trying to find the damn checkpoint. And you kind of got to keep track of like who's where and where they are, because if they disappear, you're like, oh, it's probably over there.
Right.
So like most teams have like some code for come over here, like join
bananas.
me, right?
Yeah, we found it.
Yeah, exactly.
Most of the time it's pretty transparent though.
Yeah,
But and that I think once, you know, top teams racing tend to do less of that.
Right.
But teams that get to a point where they're just trying to finish the course or trying to stay middle of the pack or whatever that is, you know, and it doesn't usually last that long unless you're like the Fijian team that makes a concerted effort, because it's hard enough with 4 people that all have different paces and break it, you know, like you got to go at the speed of your slowest member. So the bigger your team becomes, the harder it gets to do that, right? So you get 8 people, then there's always going to be somebody that's hurting, right? And so, you know, you tend to have that happen in really difficult sections where speed doesn't matter as much. And then, you know, teams that are feeling good, they're not, you know, unless you're, you know, like
3 or 4 people is the magic number.
Yeah.
Right. That's the fastest group size.
And it's crazy because people, when there are races, that big races that allow soloists never do that well, because you only have your own demons out there in the middle of the night. Like there's nobody to keep track of you, or to keep you sane. And the reality is, like, we'll talk about it. If 2, and especially sleep deprivation, if 2 team members go down and 2 team members are still like cognitive and somewhat functioning, we'll keep going, because like each person has a keeper. But as soon as 3 people, you know, and soloists we've had races where we let soloists in and they get sleep deprived in the middle of the night and just wander off and lay down somewhere and just like completely go into a different reality. And we're just like, what happened to that person that was charging, that super athlete that was like in second place? They just disappear at 4 a.m. And then, you know, it's kind of scary.
Dan, has anyone ever told you have like a Jeff Daniels thing going on?
That's one of the things that comes up. Less so now that I'm losing all my hair, but
it's not just that you look like him, you sound like him.
There's worse people to sound like, I guess.
It's anyway, that's what I've been thinking a good part of the time. Well, listen, I'm glad we got to chat. Are there things you want to plug besides your race? Are there businesses or things or sponsors you'd like to promote?
The biggest thing that I would say is that if you're interested in races and you have no idea what you're doing, call this guy.
Yeah, we'll help you out.
He and Chelsea do training like on an individual and group basis, and that will set you up for a lot more success than you would have otherwise.
And we just we love helping people get into the sport. You know, even if you don't want to, you know, come to any of our camps or any of our races, we'll at least point you in the right direction, because we'd love to see more and more people exploring this, just because it's such an amazing way to grow as a human, outside of the athletics. Like it forces you to deal with a lot of stuff and relationships and get good at communicating. And I think right now in this crazy world, like becoming better humans is becoming better relating with each other and being tolerant of each other is what we need. And so like I really look at this sport as like coming into its own right now, because it does give you, like, you either fail and you know it, or you learn those tools through that adversity that the sport puts you in. But, we've had great sponsors, and we do, like, all the local sponsors we've had over the years have been amazing, and all the athletes that we've raced with and raced against and that have inspired us. Obviously there's Team New Zealand, but basically everybody in this community has been tremendous. And we'd be like, I'm super thankful too of Amazon and whoever made that happen, Lisa Hennessy and Mark Burnett and Bear and the people that put the time and energy. I know it's a business and all that stuff, but it's pretty cool to have the energy go into something that we love. It's been this tiny niche sport, even though, like you said, it led to OCR, right? And then it still stayed this tiny niche sport as OCR kind of grew and became more available to the masses. And hopefully we can figure out a way to get the people that are ready for this sport into it. And I think Dan would be the same. I want to thank our families, like my wife, who's a tremendous racer as well. I didn't get to go to this one because we just had a new baby. Like, I want to thank her for supporting. I want to thank, Mel's family and Steven's family and Dan's wife for just giving us the opportunity to disappear for 20 days into the middle of Fiji and basically say, yeah, we won't be able to contact you for 2 weeks, and tell you how we're doing. Yeah. And I think that's a lot. This is a big sport with a lot of supporters and moving parts. So
what about your dirty hippie acro yoga?
Well, I mean, that's amazing. Have you seen some of that stuff?
I have. Tried it? Yeah, man. Dude, get me on the Slack line, bro. I'm all about it.
I mean, I'll just say it about my wife because it's easier that at some point somebody, and I'm not really gonna push for it, but at some point somebody's gonna realize that this lovely woman that I married is probably the most talented multi-sport athlete in the world, right? I mean, there you go. I just said it, right?
Wow,
because
ladies and gentlemen,
and I'm not even talking multi-sport like triathlon or like run, bike, swim, because she does all that. But like, she can walk a tightrope across a canyon, right? She can do circus level acrobatics, right? She can freaking roll a pack raft, which is like something that very few people can do. Like, I just like the amount of time or efficiency that she's been able to put into like what we call meta learning. Which is like, how do you, it's like the Tim Ferriss stuff. Like, how can I get really good at something without putting 10,000 hours in? Like, how do I train to be a high level athlete in this sport and still maintain high level athletics in this sport? Because really slacklining, like, that takes a long time to learn to walk a tightrope over a canyon, right? So how do you put the time into that and then also go win these super hard races and also teach people around the world how to do acrobatics? Like, and have kids. It's like crazy. So, I think I'm, and we're all that to some extent, but yeah, that's the dirty.
She looks a lot better doing it.
Yeah, she looks a lot better doing it. She's so feisty because she wants to be the best at everything. And she's really doesn't think she's that good at anything. And then I'm like, well, how do you, name another person that is going to do this and then go, race across, Patagonia and then come back and a week later teach an international festival of world-class acrobats. Like, at one point she had to crawl around the mat because she couldn't walk because we were so destroyed after Patagonia. And then like, we're teaching acrobatics, which is great because we're just floating in the air, right? So it was pretty, it's anyway. So that's the hippie acrobatics and my plug for my wife, I guess.
All right, cool. Let me take you off record. Hang on.